Have you ever come home, expecting a quiet evening, only to find your life going up in flames, literally? Because that's exactly what happened to me. The moment I turned into my driveway, I saw it. Thick, black smoke curling into the evening sky, flames clawing their way out of my detached garage like they had a personal vendetta. My heart plummeted. I slammed my truck into park, jumped out and ran like hell, toward the fire that was devouring everything I'd built. My garage, gone. My tools, my motorcycle, my father's old workbench, all of it consumed in a hellish inferno. And then I heard her voice. Maybe next time you'll think twice before neglecting your HOA dues, Everett. I turned, fire reflecting in my eyes and rage rising in my chest. There she was, Ruth Gallagher, the president of our neighborhood HOA, standing at the edge of my driveway with her arms folded, a smug look on her face like she was admiring a damned sunset. You did this. I growled. She scoffed. The association had to take action, Everett. You were warned. We put multiple notices on your door. We even offered you a payment plan. My fists clenched. I told you I don't owe a dime. The fees you're demanding aren't even in the bylaws. She waved her hand, like my words were just dust in the air. You live under our jurisdiction. That means you follow our rules. If you refuse, there are consequences. I barely heard her over the sound of the crackling flames and the wail of sirens closing in. But in that moment, I made a vow. If Ruth wanted war, she just got it, and I wasn't planning to lose. As the firefighters battled the blaze, drowning out the final flickers of destruction with jets of water, I stood frozen, soaked in sweat, breathing in ash, and watching the skeleton of my garage collapse into a smoldering heap. But my mind wasn't on the wreckage anymore. It was already racing ahead, calculating, planning. Ruth thought she could intimidate me into submission, that she could torch my livelihood and walk away with clean hands, hiding behind some twisted interpretation of HOA authority. But she had no idea who she was dealing with. I wasn't just some ordinary homeowner. I had resources. I had allies. And most importantly, I had nothing left to lose. As the fire chief gave me a grim nod, confirming what I already knew in my gut, that this fire was no accident, I grabbed my phone and started documenting everything. Photos of the scorched earth, the twisted remains of my motorcycle, the blackened shell of my father's workbench, now warped beyond recognition. This wasn't just arson. This was personal. And I was going to make damn sure the people responsible paid for it in full. The very next morning, while the ash was still settling and the smell of burnt rubber lingered in the air, I went straight to the source of my first piece of leverage, my security footage, mounted discreetly on the corner of my home. The cameras were angled perfectly to capture my driveway and the approach to the detached garage. I hadn't expected them to catch anything so extreme, but what I found nearly made my blood boil. There it was, clear as day, just past midnight. A hooded figure creeping across my lawn. They moved with purpose, carrying what looked like a plastic gas can. I scrubbed through the footage, heart pounding, watching as the figure splashed liquid along the foundation of the garage, then pulled something from their pocket. A flicker, a burst of light, and in seconds, flames engulfed the structure like dry timber in a bonfire. I leaned in closer, frame by frame. The hoodie concealed most of the face, but the body language, the gait, it was unmistakable. Dale, Ruth Gallagher's right-hand enforcer. The guy who always stood 2 steps behind her at HOA meetings, nodding like a trained bobblehead, enforcing her ridiculous fines with smug satisfaction. He was loyal, yes, but now I had proof that he was also criminally stupid. I copied the footage onto a flash drive, labeled it insurance, and slid it into my coat pocket. Ruth wanted to play with fire? She just gave me everything I needed to burn her empire to the ground. Armed with damning evidence and a fire still smoldering in my gut, I wasted no time. I drove straight to the sheriff's department that afternoon, the flash drive in my pocket like a loaded weapon. The moment I stepped through those glass doors, it was game time. I walked up to the front desk, introduced myself, and calmly said, "I'd like to file a report. Arson. I have the footage." That got their attention. The deputy behind the desk straightened up, eyebrows raised, and called over a detective. Within minutes, we were in the back office, the footage playing on a monitor. As the flames erupted on screen, the detective leaned forward, jaw tightening. "That's not just arson," he muttered. "That's premeditated." I nodded. "And I know who it is." They took my statement in full. I handed over the fire department's preliminary report, which confirmed traces of accelerant and the video evidence linking Dale to the crime. From there, the wheels of justice turned faster than I expected. Within 48 hours, Dale was picked up and booked. The charges: arson, trespassing, destruction of property. Word spread fast. By the end of the week, Dale wasn't just in custody. He was the talk of the neighborhood. Whispers floated from porch to porch. And suddenly, the unshakable foundation Ruth had built around herself, it started to crack. People began asking questions. Quiet ones at first. About leadership, about accountability. About how far this HOA would go to enforce their rules. And me? I wasn't even close to finished. The fire may have destroyed my garage, but it lit a fuse under something far more powerful. My plan to bring the entire HOA crashing down. With Dale behind bars and the neighborhood murmuring with suspicion, I saw the perfect opening. One that could end Ruth's reign once and for all. While she was busy scrambling to spin a narrative, I was executing mine with precision. See, what most folks don't realize is that HOAs often operate like miniature kingdoms. But those kingdoms still rest on land, and land can be bought. I had already done my homework. Weeks before the fire, I'd started digging into the HOA's financials. It wasn't hard to spot the cracks. Overdue tax notices, unpaid service contracts, and half-finished beautification projects that had mysteriously gone over budget. Ruth had been funneling community funds into vanity projects. Fountains that never flowed, signage that was ordered but never delivered, landscaping bills that no one could trace. In short, the HOA was bleeding money. That's when I made my move. I called in a favor from a buddy of mine in commercial real estate. Within hours, he confirmed it. Several key HOA-owned parcels were on the brink of foreclosure. The community clubhouse, delinquent taxes, the park where Ruth held her little rallies, under lien, and most importantly, the very office the HOA used to operate out of, available for private sale through the county due to default. I pounced. Legal maneuvering, paperwork, signatures, it all moved fast. In just 48 hours, the sale was approved. The ink was dry. I now legally owned the land the HOA had built their kingdom on. While Ruth was still clinging to her throne, I had just bought the floor out from under her. And soon, I'd rip the walls down with it. The moment the purchase was finalized, I didn't waste a single second. With the official deed in my hand and the county stamp of approval on every page, I marched straight to the heart of Ruth's empire, the HOA office. It sat smugly at the edge of the neighborhood like a monument to control, with its iron sign and pristine hedges. But now it was mine. I posted an official notice right on the door. Private property. Trespassers will be prosecuted. Beneath that, in bold print, a deadline. 48 hours to vacate. No meetings, no appeals, no special exceptions. The HOA was no longer welcome on land they didn't own. Word spread like wildfire. Residents emerged from their homes like people stepping into sunlight after a storm, murmuring, pointing, taking pictures. Some didn't believe it, until they saw Ruth herself march up my driveway, eyes blazing, fists clenched around a rolled-up clipboard like it was a weapon. "You can't do this," she shouted, waving her hands like a banshee in a business suit. I didn't say a word. I simply handed her the deed. Her face paled as she unrolled it and read the first few lines. Her hands trembled. Her jaw worked silently like she was chewing on broken glass. This isn't legal," she sputtered. "It's not only legal," I said calmly, "it's final. County records are updated. You're trespassing, Ruth." And just like that, for the first time in her long, tyrannical reign, Ruth Gallagher had nothing left to stand on. Ruth stood there, gripping the deed like it might vanish if she just wished hard enough. Her eyes darted over the pages, desperately scanning for a loophole, some hidden clause that would save her. But it was all there, clear, binding, and irreversible. The land she'd ruled from the office where she'd issued fines like royal decrees. the park she gated off from kids for aesthetic reasons. All of it belonged to me now. Her voice, usually crisp and commanding, faltered. You don't understand what you're doing. This land belongs to the community. I folded my arms. No, Ruth. It belonged to a crumbling organization that couldn't pay its taxes. And now, it belongs to someone who's going to make sure it never falls into the wrong hands again. A pause. Then, like a dying fire sparking one last time, she straightened her spine. This isn't over, she snapped. The HOA has rights. We'll challenge this in court. I didn't blink. Go ahead, but legal battles cost money. And unless you're planning to pay with Monopoly cash, I suggest you start packing. She flinched at that, her mouth open in protest, but no words came out. Just the sound of her heels clicking furiously against the pavement as she turned and stormed away. And I stood there still, silent, victorious. With Ruth out of moves and the deed firmly in my name, I didn't waste a second. The very next morning, I drafted an official eviction notice and posted it squarely on the HOA office door. It was poetic, really, watching the self-proclaimed queen of community order get served by the very system she once weaponized against everyone else. The clubhouse, once a symbol of their unchecked power, was now mine, and I made it clear. No more meetings, no more intimidation, and no more arbitrary rules disguised as community standards. That park, Ruth, had turned into a private country club for the board, open to every resident. No gates, no signs, just a clean space for families to gather, for kids to play without an HOA enforcer breathing down their necks. As the notices went up, the whispers began. Neighbors peeked out of windows, clustered in groups, murmuring in disbelief. I wasn't exactly the most social guy in town, but even I could feel the buzz growing, like pressure releasing from a balloon that had been overinflated for far too long. That evening, I stood outside the old HOA building, now just another space under new ownership, as a small crowd of residents began to gather. I didn't prepare a speech. I didn't need to. I know you're all wondering what happens now, I said, my voice steady. For years, the HOA has ruled through fear and control. That ends tonight. There'll be no more fines for garden gnomes, no more threats over mailbox colors, and no more power trips dressed up as policies. This land, the clubhouse, the park, it's yours again. People nodded. Some smiled. A few teared up. And for the first time in a long time, the community felt like exactly that, a community, not a dictatorship. But not everyone was ready to let go of the past so easily. As I stood there talking with neighbors, answering questions and shaking hands, one voice cut through the hopeful murmur like a dull blade. What about Ruth? Someone called from the back of the crowd. The air shifted. You could feel it, like a cold draft sneaking through a crack in the door. I paused, letting the question hang for a beat before answering. She's not going to give up easily, I admitted. People like her never do. But she's lost her leverage. If she tries anything else, we'll handle it. With the law, not with threats, not with fear. That seemed to settle it. People started to talk again, more openly this time. Stories poured out like floodgates had opened. One woman near the front said Ruth fined her for having a small fountain in her garden because it attracted pests. A man admitted he paid over $1,000 in random maintenance fees he never even understood, just to avoid the constant harassment. It was overwhelming to hear how much people had silently endured. They weren't just angry, they were relieved. For the first time in years, they felt seen. They felt safe. They felt free. And just like that, something shifted. The neighborhood that once lived in hushed tones, afraid of backyard inspections and mailbox citations, began to breathe again. No one was looking over their shoulder anymore, except maybe Ruth. In the days that followed, that spark of unity turned into something real, tangible. With the HOA gone and Ruth effectively powerless, the community began to reshape itself not through control, but through choice. Neighbors who barely waved before were now helping each other repaint fences, mow lawns, or share a drink on a porch swing. You could feel the tension melt away, replaced by casual conversation and laughter echoing down the streets. But I didn't relax, not entirely. People like Ruth don't just fade quietly. And I was right to be cautious. One afternoon, a plain envelope showed up in my mailbox. No return address. My name, scrawled in messy handwriting. Inside was a single page, no threats, no curses, just a haunting promise. Without order, your precious neighborhood will rot. The HOA was protection. You took that away. Let's see what grows in the ruins. No signature. But I didn't need one. I folded the paper, slid it into a file marked insurance, and stepped outside into the sunlight. Around me, life moved on. Kids played in driveways. Someone was grilling burgers. Wind chimes sang in a breeze. Yes, the very ones Ruth had once fined a woman $50 for. Maybe something would grow in the ruins. Maybe it would be something beautiful. And as I looked around at a neighborhood no longer chained to fear, I smiled. Because whatever came next, we were ready.